The vast darkness of space stretched endlessly before the Vani defense outpost. Commander Lero stood motionless at the observation deck, his slender frame silhouetted against the backdrop of stars. The outpost's emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across his pale features as he watched the approaching Krath fleet with mounting dread. "How many?" he asked, his voice barely audible. 273 warships, replied his second-in-command, Captain Rex. "They've deployed in standard Krath formation. We estimate full orbital encirclement within 6 hours." Lero's four-fingered hands trembled slightly as he clasped them behind his back. The Vani were not warriors. They never had been. Their civilization had flourished through diplomacy, art, and scientific advancement. Their defensive capabilities were minimal, designed only to deter small-scale piracy, not to withstand the full might of the Krath Empire. "The evacuation?" Lero inquired. "Proceeding as planned, but we lack sufficient transport vessels to evacuate everyone," Rex replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "At current capacity, we can save perhaps 30% of the civilian population." Lero closed his large, almond-shaped eyes momentarily, allowing himself a brief moment of despair. The Krath had been methodically expanding their territory for the past decade, conquering one system after another with brutal efficiency. Any resistance was met with overwhelming force, any surrender with occupation and subjugation. The Galactic Council, a loose alliance of spacefaring civilizations, had proven utterly ineffective at stopping the Krath advance. "Have we received any response to our distress signals?" Lero asked, though he already knew the answer. Rex hesitated before responding. "Most systems have acknowledged receipt but declined to intervene. The Galactic Council has expressed deep concern but claims it lacks the authority to mobilize a joint defense force without unanimous consent, which they'll never get." Lero finished bitterly. The Council's requirement for unanimous decisions had rendered it paralyzed in the face of the Krath threat. Too many members feared becoming the next target if they openly opposed the Empire. "There is one response that might be of interest," Rex said hesitantly. Lero turned to face his subordinate, curiosity briefly overriding his despair. "Go on." "We received a direct communication from the Terran Federation. They've pledged military support." A moment of silence followed as Lero processed this information. The Terrans? They're barely more than a footnote in galactic politics. How many ships can they possibly spare? Rex consulted his datapad. They've committed a fleet of 40 vessels. Lero couldn't suppress a bitter laugh. 40 ships against nearly 300? That's not support, it's suicide. Perhaps, Rex acknowledged, but they're the only ones who answered our call. Lero turned back to the observation window, watching as the distant pinpoints of light that represented the Krath Armada grew imperceptibly larger. The Terrans are either very brave or very foolish. Either way, I fear they're dooming themselves alongside us. Nananditinamacha. Colonel Henry Blake sat rigidly in his command chair aboard the TFS Resilient, flagship of the Terran Federation's 4th Expeditionary Fleet, at 53 years old. Blake was a veteran of numerous conflicts, his weathered face bearing the subtle scars of battles fought both on planetary surfaces and in the cold vacuum of space. His short-cropped gray hair and penetrating blue eyes gave him an appearance of perpetual alertness. Even after 36 hours without sleep. "Status report," he demanded, his voice carrying the distinctive rasp of someone who had spent too many years barking orders in hostile environments. Commander Zara Rodriguez, his executive officer and longtime friend, approached with a data tablet. At 47, she matched Blake in experience if not in title. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and the lines around her eyes spoke of the same years of hardship and difficult decisions. "All ships report ready for the final jump, sir." She replied, "Combat systems are primed, and all crews are at battle stations." Blake nodded tersely. "And our intelligence on the Krath deployment?" "Last update from Vani reconnaissance indicates the Krath have nearly completed their encirclement of the planet. Standard Krath doctrine suggests they'll begin planetary bombardment within the next 3 hours to soften defenses before landing occupation forces." Blake studied the tactical display hovering above the command console. 40 blue markers representing his fleet were arranged in a loose formation, poised at the edge of the jump point that would take them directly to the Vani system. In contrast, the enemy forces were represented by a sea of red markers surrounding the green sphere of Vani Prime. 273 ships, Blake muttered. Nearly 7-to-1 odds. The Council's official position is that intervention would be futile. Zara noted, her tone making it clear what she thought of that assessment. "The Council can go to hell," Blake replied flatly. "We've been monitoring the Krath expansion for years while they've debated and delayed. I won't stand by and watch another civilization fall because the Council is too paralyzed by fear to act." "Sir," Zara began hesitantly, "I support this mission wholeheartedly, but I must ask, do we have a viable strategy? Conventional tactics would suggest we're severely outmatched." A ghost of a smile touched Blake's lips. "Conventional tactics are precisely what the Krath are expecting, Commander. Their entire military doctrine is built around overwhelming force and predictable responses. They've never faced humanity in open combat. They consider us a minor species from a death world," Zara observed. "A misconception we're about to correct," Blake responded. He pressed a button on his chair's armrest, opening a fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Colonel Blake. You all know our mission and the odds we face. The Krath believe their superior numbers guarantee victory. They believe that 40 ships cannot stand against 273. He paused, letting his words hang in the silence. "They're about to learn why humans have survived on a planet that tried to kill us at every turn. Why we thrived on a world that other species consider uninhabitable. Every one of you is trained for this moment, to fight smarter, not just harder. To use creativity where others rely on brute force. Today, we show the galaxy what it means to be Terran." Blake's finger hovered over the command to initiate the jump. "For the Vani, for humanity, for all who stand against tyranny, we fight. Blake out." With a decisive motion, he pressed the command, and the fleet disappeared into the swirling vortex of hyperspace. "Itamonts. Supreme Commander Vash of the Krath Empire surveyed the holographic display of the Vani system with cold satisfaction. His massive frame, standing nearly 8 feet tall with iridescent scales that shimmered in the dim lighting of the command bridge, cast an imposing shadow over his subordinates. The Krath were naturally predatory, evolved from apex hunters on their homeworld, and Vash embodied the perfect specimen of his species, powerful, cunning, and utterly without mercy. "The encirclement is complete, Supreme Commander," reported his tactical officer. "All Vani military installations have been targeted, and bombardment sequences are prepared." "Excellent," Vash replied, his voice a deep rumble that reverberated through the command deck. "Begin the bombardment on my mark. I want their defensive capabilities reduced to ash before we commit ground forces." "Supreme Commander," interrupted the sensor officer, her scales flashing with agitation. "We're detecting spatial distortions at the outer edge of the system. Hyperspace signatures incoming." Vash's yellow eyes narrowed. "Identification?" "Unknown, sir. Configuration suggests Terran vessels." A murmur of surprise rippled through the bridge crew. Vash's expression remained impassive. but inwardly he felt a flicker of curiosity. The Terrans were newcomers to the galactic stage, a species from a high-gravity, high-radiation planet that most civilized beings would consider uninhabitable. Their technology was adequate but unremarkable, and their military presence in the wider galaxy was minimal. "How many vessels?" Vash demanded. 40, Supreme Commander." Vash's mouth twisted into what passed for a smile among the Krath, a baring of razor-sharp teeth that conveyed amusement rather than warmth. 40 ships? Against our armada? The humans are either remarkably brave or remarkably stupid. He studied the tactical display as the blue markers representing the Terran vessels appeared at the system's edge. Maintain the encirclement. Divert the 3rd and 4th battle groups to intercept the Terran fleet. Crush them quickly and return to the primary mission. "Yes, Supreme Commander." Vash watched as 70 of his warships broke formation and moved to engage the human interlopers. The Terrans were clearly outmatched and outgunned. This would be a brief diversion, nothing more, a footnote in the glorious conquest of the Vani system. How wrong he was. As the Terran fleet emerged from hyperspace at the outer reaches of the Vani system, Blake immediately noted the reaction of the Krath armada. Just as predicted, they had detached a significant portion of their forces to intercept while maintaining their stranglehold on the planet. 70 ships breaking off to engage us, Zara reported. Krath battle groups 3 and 4, according to intelligence designations. Blake nodded. Right on schedule. They're following standard doctrine. Commit overwhelming force to eliminate the distraction, then return to the primary objective. He opened the tactical channel. All ships execute Operation Thunderbolt. Groups Alpha and Bravo. Prepare for dispersal maneuver. Charlie and Delta. Hold in reserve formation. Execute on my mark. The 40 Terran warships, previously arranged in a standard approach formation, suddenly split into smaller tactical units. 20 ships under Blake's direct command formed Group Alpha, while another 10 comprised Group Bravo under Commander Zara's tactical control. The remaining 10 ships held position as the reserve force. A dispersal maneuver in 3, 2, 1, mark. What happened next defied all conventional space combat tactics. Instead of maintaining a unified battle line to maximize firepower concentration, the Terran vessels scattered in seemingly random directions, each ship taking an independent vector that appeared chaotic and uncoordinated. On the Krath flagship, Supreme Commander Vash watched with bewilderment as the Terran formation dissolved into chaos. "Hey, what are they doing?" he demanded. "This violates every principle of space combat doctrine." His tactical officer appeared equally confused. "Unknown, Supreme Commander. They appear to be scattering. Perhaps their formation computers have malfunctioned." Vash's bewilderment quickly gave way to disdain. "They're panicking, typical of a species with limited space combat experience. Accelerate the attack, destroy them while they're disorganized." The Krath battle group surged forward, their formation maintaining the disciplined hierarchical structure that had brought the Empire countless victories. Their warships were arranged in precise overlapping fields of fire, designed to create an inescapable killing zone that would annihilate any opposing force through sheer firepower. But as they closed with the scattered Terran vessels, something unexpected happened. The human ships, rather than attempting to reform their broken formation, began executing maneuvers that seemed to defy the laws of physics. They twisted and turned at angles and accelerations that should have torn the ships apart or liquefied their crews. "Sir," reported the Krath sensor officer, her voice tinged with disbelief, "the Terran ships are pulling maneuvers at forces exceeding 15 Gs. No organic pilot should be able to survive such stresses." Vash frowned. Are they using automated systems, drone ships? Negative, sir. We're detecting full life sign complements aboard all vessels. They're just withstanding the G-forces. What the Krath commanders didn't understand, couldn't understand, was that humans evolved on a high-gravity death world. The average Terran could withstand forces that would crush most other sapient species, while the ships were indeed equipped with inertial dampeners. Terran physiology allowed their pilots to push the boundaries of what was considered survivable maneuvering, as the Krath firing solutions continually failed to connect with the erratically moving Terran vessels. Blake gave his next order. All Alpha units execute attack pattern Scorpion. Target propulsion and weapon systems only. I repeat, disable. Do not destroy. The 20 ships of Group Alpha suddenly reversed their seemingly random trajectories and converged on the Krath formation from multiple vectors simultaneously. Instead of focusing fire on destroying enemy vessels, they executed precisely targeted strikes against engines, weapon emplacements, and sensor arrays. E-Bravo Group, execute Hydra maneuver, Blake commanded. Draw their fire and create chaos in their command and control systems. The 10 ships of Bravo Group initiated electronic warfare protocols, flooding Krath communication channels with interference while projecting false sensor readings that multiplied their apparent numbers. To the Krath sensors, it suddenly appeared as if dozens of additional Terran warships had materialized among their formation. On the Krath command ship, alarms blared as communications broke down between vessels. "We're losing coordination with the forward elements," reported the communications officer. "Electronic countermeasures are disrupting our battle network." "How?" Vash snarled. "Their technology should be inferior to ours." "Sir, the Terrans are targeting our ships with surgical precision," the tactical officer reported, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. "They're specifically disabling weapons and propulsion systems rather than attempting to destroy our vessels outright." Vash's scales darkened with rage. "This is impossible. No species fights this way. No tactician would waste firepower on disabling rather than destroying." But the evidence was undeniable. The disciplined Krath formation was rapidly deteriorating into confusion as ship after ship reported critical systems failures without catastrophic destruction. Unable to maneuver or fire effectively, yet still intact, the disabled vessels became obstacles that disrupted the carefully orchestrated Krath battle plan. "Sir," Zara reported on the Resilient, "Krath battle groups are showing signs of disorganization. Their formation integrity is breaking down." Blake nodded grimly. "Press the advantage. Charlie Group, commence avalanche protocol. Delta, prepare for cleanup operations." The reserve Terran forces now joined the fray, executing yet another unorthodox tactical maneuver. Rather than engaging directly, they launched specialized ordnance that didn't target the Krath ships themselves but instead detonated in carefully calculated patterns within the Krath formation. These detonations created localized gravitational distortions that further disrupted the enemy's ability to maintain formation or execute coordinated maneuvers. Within 45 minutes of engagement, what had begun as a 70-40 numerical advantage for the Krath had transformed into a complete tactical victory for the Terran forces. Over half the Krath vessels were drifting with disabled propulsion and weapons systems, while the remainder struggled to maintain any semblance of coordinated action amidst the electronic warfare and gravitational distortions. "Sir," Zara reported with barely contained amazement, "Krath battle groups 3 and 4 are effectively neutralized as cohesive fighting forces. Casualties on both sides are minimal. We've lost no ships, and Krath life signs remain stable on the disabled vessels." Blake allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Now for Phase 2. All ships regroup and prepare for assault on the main Krath fleet. Let's show them what happens when they threaten a peaceful civilization. Moons, Chunamundadasked. Supreme Commander Vash could not believe the reports streaming into the command center. His 3rd and 4th battle groups, elite units that had conquered dozens of star systems, had been effectively neutralized by a vastly outnumbered Terran fleet using tactics that violated every established principle of space combat. "This is impossible," he snarled, smashing a scaled fist against the tactical display. "How could 40 ships defeat 70 of our finest vessels?" His tactical officer, visibly shaken, attempted to explain. "Supreme Commander, the Terrans aren't fighting according to any recognized doctrine. They're using maneuvers that should be physically impossible for their crews to survive. Their targeting is precise beyond anything we've encountered. They're deliberately disabling rather than destroying our ships." "And the purpose of such a tactic?" Vash demanded. "Unknown, sir. It's inefficient by conventional standards, but—" The officer hesitated. "Speak freely," Vash commanded, his voice dangerously low. "Sir, by disabling rather than destroying our vessels, they've created a field of obstacles that prevents our remaining ships from maneuvering effectively. Additionally, our crews remain alive, meaning we must divert resources to potential rescue operations rather than focusing entirely on combat." Vash's yellow eyes narrowed as he considered this analysis. It was unorthodox, certainly, but undeniably effective. These humans had turned the Krath's numerical advantage against them through tactics no sane military commander would consider. "Status of the main fleet?" he inquired. "Maintaining orbital encirclement of Vani Prime. Sir, bombardment has been temporarily suspended pending your orders regarding the Terran threat." Vash studied the tactical display, noting with growing concern that the Terran fleet had regrouped and was now advancing toward the main Krath armada surrounding Vani Prime. Logic dictated that the humans, having expended significant resources neutralizing 70 Krath warships, would be in no condition to challenge the remaining 200. Yet something in Vash's predatory instincts, the same instincts that had propelled him to supreme command, warned him not to underestimate these Terrans again. "All vessels, prepare for imminent engagement," he ordered. "Maintain the encirclement but redirect 60% of our combat power to intercept the Terran fleet. I want targeting solutions that prioritize complete destruction. No disabled vessels, no survivors. Obliterate them entirely." As his orders were relayed throughout the fleet, Vash found himself experiencing an unfamiliar sensation: doubt. For the first time in his long and distinguished military career, he faced an enemy whose actions he could not predict, whose tactics defied conventional analysis. "Supreme Commander," the communications officer interrupted his thoughts. "We're receiving a transmission from the Terran flagship." Vash's scales rippled with surprise. "Put it through." The holographic display shifted to reveal the image of Colonel Henry Blake, his weathered human face an unreadable mask. "Supreme Commander Vash," Blake began without preamble. "This is Colonel Henry Blake of the Terran Federation. Your forces have initiated unprovoked aggression against the sovereign Vani system, a peaceful civilization under Terran protection." Vash couldn't suppress a bark of laughter. "Protection? Your 40 ships against my armada? You've had one lucky engagement, human, but luck will not save you against the full might of the Krath Empire." Blake's expression remained impassive. "I'm not contacting you to debate military tactics, Commander. I'm offering you a single opportunity to withdraw your forces from this system immediately. Failure to comply will result in the complete neutralization of your fleet." The sheer audacity of the threat left Vash momentarily speechless. When he recovered, his voice was a dangerous growl. "You dare threaten the Krath Empire? Your species is barely out of its cradle, Colonel. You know nothing of galactic warfare." "Perhaps," Blake acknowledged. But we know something about survival against overwhelming odds. It's what humans do best. You have 1 hour to begin withdrawal procedures. Blake out. The transmission terminated, leaving Vash staring at the empty display in disbelief. He's bluffing, Vash declared, though a flicker of uncertainty had taken root in his mind. Maintain battle readiness and continue as planned. The humans have shown us their tactics. We won't be caught unprepared again. But as he issued the orders, Vash couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling that he was missing something crucial about these Terrans, something that might prove catastrophic for the Krath Empire. In the command center of the Vani Defense Outpost, Commander Lero watched the tactical display with a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. The seemingly impossible had occurred. 40 Terran ships had effectively neutralized 70 Krath warships without a single confirmed destruction on either side. How did they do it? He whispered to Captain Rex. Rex shook his head, equally bewildered. No conventional tactical doctrine could explain this outcome. The Terrans, they're fighting like nothing we've ever seen. As they watched, the Terran fleet regrouped and began advancing toward the main Krath armada surrounding Vani Prime. They're continuing the engagement, Lero observed, his voice tinged with awe. Against 200 Krath warships. It's either the bravest or most foolhardy act I've ever witnessed. The communications officer interrupted. Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the Terran flagship. Moments later, Colonel Blake's face appeared on the main display. Unlike the grim, determined expression he had shown to Vash, his features now conveyed reassurance. Commander Lero, this is Colonel Blake. The initial phase of our operation has been successful. We've neutralized a significant portion of the Krath fleet while maintaining minimal casualties on both sides. Lero stepped forward. Colonel, your tactics were unprecedented. How did you achieve such results against superior numbers? A hint of a smile touched Blake's lips. Let's just say that humanity has a different perspective on combat than most galactic civilizations. We've spent our evolutionary history adapting to adversity rather than trying to overwhelm it. But surely you don't intend to engage the main Krath fleet? Lero asked incredulously. Even with your unconventional tactics, the numerical disparity is insurmountable. Numbers aren't everything, Commander, Blake replied cryptically. I need your people to be ready. When the Krath defenses begin to falter, I want you to execute an immediate evacuation of as many civilians as possible through the corridors we'll create. We won't be able to hold them open indefinitely. Lero's large eyes blinked in confusion. Corridors? Colonel, I don't understand how you intend to breach the Krath encirclement with so few ships. Trust me, Commander. Sometimes the best way to win isn't by following the rules everyone expects you to follow. Blake's expression grew serious. Be ready to move your people when the opportunity presents itself. Blake out. As the transmission ended, Lero turned to Rex. Prepare all available transport vessels. If the Terrans somehow create an evacuation route, we need to be ready to exploit it immediately. Rex nodded, though his expression remained doubtful. Do you really believe they can challenge the main Krath fleet? Lero gazed at the tactical display, where the tiny blue markers representing the Terran ships continued their advance against the overwhelming red tide of the Krath armada. I don't know, he admitted, but they've already achieved one impossible victory today. Perhaps they have another miracle to offer. As the Terran fleet approached the main Krath armada, Blake studied the tactical display with intense concentration. The enemy had reconfigured their formation, clearly anticipating another unorthodox attack and preparing countermeasures. This time, they wouldn't have the advantage of surprise. They've adapted their formation. Zara observed, tighter grouping, Overlapping fields of fire, reinforced electronic countermeasures. They're ready for our previous tactics. Blake nodded grimly. As expected, time for Plan Omega. Zara's expression grew serious. Sir, Plan Omega hasn't been field-tested against an enemy of this caliber. The simulations showed a high probability of success, but we're beyond the luxury of caution. Commander, Blake interrupted. The Vani don't have time for us to wage a conventional campaign of attrition, even if we could win such a fight, which we can't. Omega is our best shot at creating enough chaos to evacuate as many civilians as possible. He opened the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Colonel Blake. The enemy is prepared for our previous tactics. So we're executing Plan Omega. This operation will require perfect timing and coordination. May whatever gods you believe in watch over us all. Commence Omega sequence on my mark. The 40 Terran warships, previously maintaining a standard approach formation, suddenly accelerated to maximum velocity directly toward the heart of the Krath Armada. To the Krath observers, it appeared to be a suicidal charge, 40 ships on a direct collision course with over 200 enemy vessels. They've gone mad, Supreme Commander Vash declared as he watched the Terran fleets approach. They're attempting a direct assault against our main force. His tactical officer appeared equally baffled. It contradicts their previous tactics entirely. Supreme Commander, perhaps they've recognized the futility of their position and chosen to die fighting rather than retreat. Vash wasn't convinced. The humans had proven themselves too cunning for such a simplistic explanation. Maintain full alert status. I want targeting solutions on every Terran vessel. The moment they enter optimal range, unleash everything we have. As the Terran fleet continued its headlong charge toward the Krath Armada, the distance between the opposing forces rapidly diminished. When they reached a predetermined point, just outside optimal Krath weapons range, Blake gave his next order. Execute Sunburst Maneuver now, in perfect synchronization. All 40 Terran vessels simultaneously activated specialized devices that had remained dormant until this moment. These were not weapons in the conventional sense, but rather advanced gravitational distortion generators. Technology that the Terran Federation had kept carefully hidden from the wider galactic community. The effect was immediate and devastating. Spheres of warped space-time erupted around each Terran ship, creating localized gravitational anomalies that played havoc with the Krath targeting systems and disrupted the carefully maintained formation of their fleet. Ships that had been flying in precise patterns suddenly found themselves pulled off course, their navigational systems unable to compensate for the rapidly shifting gravitational landscape. "What's happening?" Vash demanded as alarms blared across his command deck. "Report!" "Massive gravitational distortions throughout the formation," the science officer replied, her voice strained. "They're generating artificial gravity wells, technology we didn't know they possessed. Navigation systems are failing, and ships are being pulled out of position." Even as the Krath struggled to maintain their formation against the gravitational onslaught, Blake initiated the next phase of Plan Omega. All ships, execute Phoenix deployment. The Terran vessels, still projecting their gravitational distortion fields, suddenly split into 10 distinct strike groups of 4 ships each. Rather than engaging the entire Krath fleet simultaneously, they targeted specific sectors of the encirclement, concentrating their disruptive effect in localized areas. They're creating gaps in the encirclement, Zara reported as the tactical display updated. Sectors 7, 12, and 19 are showing critical formation breakdown. Blake nodded in satisfaction. Transmit the corridor coordinates to the Vani. Tell them to begin evacuation immediately through the designated routes. On Vani Prime, Commander Lero received the unexpected transmission with a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. The Terrans have created 3 evacuation corridors through the Krath blockade, he announced to his staff. Launch all available transport vessels immediately. Priority to children, medical personnel, and cultural preservation teams. As the Vani transports began lifting off toward the newly created gaps in the Krath encirclement, Supreme Commander Vash watched in growing fury as his carefully orchestrated battle plan disintegrated into chaos. This is unacceptable, he roared. How are 40 ships dismantling our entire fleet strategy? Sir, his tactical officer replied hesitantly. The Terrans aren't trying to destroy our fleet. They're deliberately creating evacuation corridors for the Vani. Civilian transports are already passing through the gaps in our formation. Vash's eyes narrowed dangerously. Redirect all available firepower to close those gaps. No Vani vessel escapes this system. But implementing that order proved far more difficult than issuing it. The gravitational distortions continued to wreak havoc with Krath navigation and weapon systems, while the Terran strike groups executed precisely coordinated maneuvers to maintain the evacuation corridors. Any Krath vessel that attempted to close the gaps found itself subjected to the same surgical disabling strikes that had neutralized the initial 70-ship detachment. For 2 hours, the battle raged across the Vani system. The Terran fleet, despite being outnumbered 5-1, managed to maintain the evacuation corridors through a combination of technological surprise, unorthodox tactics, and sheer determination. Dozens of Vani transport vessels escaped through the gaps, carrying thousands of civilians to safety. But the cost was mounting. The gravitational distortion generators couldn't be operated indefinitely, and the constant high-G maneuvers were taking a physical toll on the Terran crews. One by one, Terran vessels began reporting system failures and combat damage as the Krath gradually adapted to their tactics. Sir, Zara reported grimly, we're down to 32 operational vessels. Gravitational generators are approaching critical failure thresholds, and our crews can't sustain these G-forces much longer. Blake studied the tactical display, noting with grim satisfaction that over 100 Vani transports had successfully escaped through the corridors. It wasn't the entire population, but it was far more than would have survived otherwise. What's the status of the Krath fleet? He asked. They're regrouping, Zara replied. Approximately 60% of their vessels remain fully combat effective. They're adapting to our gravitational distortions and developing countermeasures. I estimate we have perhaps 30 minutes before the evacuation corridors collapse entirely. Blake nodded, his expression resolute. Signal the Vani. Tell them they have 30 minutes to get as many people out as possible. After that, he paused, considering their limited options. After that, we implement the final phase of Plan Omega. Zara's eyes widened slightly. Sir, the final phase was considered a last resort in the planning simulations. The risk to our own vessels. I'm aware of the risks, Commander. Blake interrupted. But we always knew this wasn't likely to be a round-trip mission. Transmit my orders to the fleet. Prepare for the Thanatos Protocol. As the battle continued to rage and the evacuation corridors began to narrow under increasing Krath pressure, Blake opened a direct channel to Supreme Commander Vash. Vash, he began without ceremony. Your fleet is in disarray. Your battle strategy has failed, and the people you came to conquer are escaping your grasp. Withdraw now, and you might salvage something from this debacle. Vash's scaled face appeared on the display, contorted with fury. You dare to offer terms human. Your ships are failing, your tactics becoming predictable. We may have underestimated you initially, but the outcome is inevitable. The Krath Empire does not retreat. Blake's expression remained impassive. Then you leave us no choice. Be advised that we're implementing our final contingency measure. May your gods have mercy on your souls. Because we will not. The transmission cut off before Vash could respond. On the Krath command ship, the Supreme Commander turned to his tactical officer. What final contingency could they possibly have? He demanded. Their ships are on the verge of failure, their crews exhausted. This is nothing but a desperate bluff. The tactical officer appeared less certain. Sir, the humans have consistently employed technologies and tactics we didn't anticipate. We should at least consider the possibility. Enough, Vash snarled. Press the attack. Close those evacuation corridors and prepare to resume planetary bombardment. I want the Vani homeworld reduced to ash for this humiliation. But even as he issued the orders, a new alarm sounded on the command deck. Supreme Commander, the sensor officer reported, her voice tight with tension. The Terran vessels are emitting massive energy signatures unlike anything in our database. Power levels are off the scale and still rising. On the Resilient, Blake gave his final order. All ships, execute Thanatos Protocol. Synchronize gravitational generators to Convergence Point Alpha. May Earth remember our sacrifice. The remaining Terran vessels, scattered throughout the battlefield, suddenly adjusted their positions. Their gravitational distortion generators, previously operating independently, now synchronized their output to create a single, massive gravitational anomaly at a carefully calculated point in space, directly in the center of the Krath formation. The effect began slowly but accelerated with terrifying rapidity. A visible distortion appeared in space, a swirling vortex of darkness that began pulling in everything within its influence. The nearest Krath vessels were the first to feel its effects, their engines straining futilely against the inexorable pull. What is happening? Vash demanded, genuine fear creeping into his voice for the first time. They've created an artificial singularity, the science officer replied, her voice trembling. A temporary black hole. It's pulling in our ships. We can't break free. Impossible. Such technology is beyond our understanding, the officer finished. But the evidence is undeniable. The singularity is growing in strength and will collapse in approximately 15 minutes according to our projections. But by then, half our fleet will be caught in its event horizon. Vash stared at the tactical display in horror as dozens of his ships were inexorably drawn toward the swirling vortex at the center of the battlefield. Even his own command vessel was beginning to feel the pull, the engines whining in protest as they fought against the gravitational tide. Emergency broadcast on all frequencies, he ordered, his pride finally giving way to the instinct for survival. All Krath vessels, break formation and retreat immediately. Maximum emergency power to engines. As the Krath fleet frantically attempted to escape the artificial singularity's pull, Blake watched from the Resilient with grim satisfaction. The Thanatos Protocol, the synchronized creation of a temporary gravitational singularity, was the Terran Federation's most closely guarded military secret. Its use had been authorized only as an absolute last resort, and with good reason. The power requirements were enormous, the technical precision required was extreme, and the risks to the ships generating the anomaly were substantial. Sir, Zara reported, the singularity is stable and performing as predicted. 87 Krath vessels are already caught in the inescapable zone. The remainder are attempting to retreat but struggling against the gravitational influence. And our ships? Blake asked. Maintaining position, but the strain on the generators is critical. We have perhaps 10 minutes before catastrophic failure. Blake nodded. Enough time. Signal the Vani. Have they completed the evacuation? Final transports are clearing the system now. Sir, they report approximately 62% of the population successfully evacuated. It wasn't a complete victory, but given the circumstances, it was a miracle. Blake allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before focusing on their own survival. All ships, prepare for emergency jump on my mark. Disengage gravitational generators in synchronized sequence to prevent singularity collapse. The Terran vessels, their mission accomplished, began the delicate process of disengaging from the Thanatos protocol. One by one, they redirected power from their gravitational generators to their hyperspace engines, preparing for immediate retreat. On the Krath command ship, now straining at maximum power to escape the singularity's pull, Vash watched with a mixture of fury and disbelief as the Terran vessels prepared to depart. "They're escaping," he snarled. "After causing this devastation, they simply leave." "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "over half our fleet is lost, either destroyed or irrecoverably caught in the singularity's pull. The remainder are scattered and in no condition to pursue. The Terrans have defeated us." The admission clearly cost the officer dearly, but the evidence was undeniable. The mighty Krath Armada, which had begun the day with overwhelming numerical superiority, had been decisively defeated by a handful of Terran ships using tactics and technology that defied conventional understanding. As the Terran fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind the dying artificial singularity and the remnants of the once proud Krath Armada, Vash made a decision that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. "Open a channel to all remaining Krath vessels," he ordered. "We are withdrawing from the Vani system effective immediately. Set course for Krath Prime." The defeat was humiliating, but Vash was a survivor above all else. The Terrans had proven themselves far more dangerous than anyone in the galaxy had suspected. This would not be the end of the conflict. Vash would ensure that, but it would require a complete reassessment of Krath military doctrine and a new approach to dealing with these humans from their death world. Shalabumum. 1 week later, Colonel Henry Blake stood before the Galactic Council, his weathered face impassive as he addressed the assembled representatives of 24 spacefaring civilizations. The circular chamber, with its soaring crystalline dome and tiered seating, hummed with subdued conversation as species that rarely agreed on anything found themselves united in stunned disbelief at recent events. The Terran Federation acted unilaterally because this council failed in its primary duty. Blake stated bluntly, "While you debated and delayed, innocent civilizations fell to Krath aggression. The Vani would have been next had we not intervened." The chairperson, a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin, leaned forward. "Colonel Blake, while the Council acknowledges the unexpected success of your operation, the fact remains that the Terran Federation committed an act of war against the Krath Empire without sanction from this body. Such unilateral military action threatens the very foundation of galactic peace." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Blake allowed it to subside before responding. "A peace?" he repeated, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Is that what you call standing by while entire civilizations are conquered and subjugated? The Krath have violated the sovereignty of 17 systems in the past decade while this council issued strongly worded condemnations and nothing more. The council operates by consensus," the chairperson replied defensively. "Military intervention requires unanimous approval, which was not forthcoming in the Vani situation. Because too many of you feared becoming the next target," Blake countered. "Fear paralyzed this body while innocents suffered. The Terran Federation refused to be paralyzed." A representative from one of the more militant council species, a reptilian being with armored scales, spoke up. "What the Council truly wishes to understand, Colonel, is how 40 of your vessels defeated a Krath Armada of nearly 300. Such a victory defies all conventional military analysis." Blake's expression remained carefully neutral. "The Terran Federation employed tactics and technologies appropriate to the situation. The details remain classified for obvious security reasons. This provoked an outburst of objections from multiple council members, eventually quelled by the chairperson's intervention. Colonel Blake, the chairperson continued, "The council is concerned about the implications of your victory. The balance of power that has maintained relative stability in this galaxy has been severely disrupted. The Krath Empire, while aggressive, was a known quantity. The Terran Federation is now an unknown variable with demonstrated military capabilities far beyond previous assessments." Blake couldn't suppress a bitter smile. "In other words, you were comfortable with the devil you knew, even as it devoured your neighbors one by one. Now you fear us because we've shown the devil can be defeated. Did we fear unrestrained military power in the hands of any single species?" the chairperson corrected. "Particularly one as unpredictable as humanity." "Unpredictable," Blake repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, I suppose that's accurate. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us at every turn. We survived through adaptability, creativity, and determination. Qualities that served us well against the Krath and will continue to serve us in the future." He straightened, his voice taking on a formal tone. "The Terran Federation does not seek conquest or domination. We seek only to protect ourselves and those who cannot protect themselves. The Vani system now falls under Terran protection, as does any civilization that requests our aid against aggression." This announcement caused another stir in the chamber. The chairperson struggled to maintain order before addressing Blake again. "You propose to establish a competing security framework outside council authority. This is unprecedented and potentially destabilizing." "What I propose," Blake countered, "is to fill the vacuum left by this council's inaction. If the council cannot or will not protect peaceful civilizations from predatory empires like the Krath, then someone must. The Terran Federation accepts that responsibility." He paused, surveying the assembled representatives. "But we would prefer collaboration to competition. The Terran Federation formally requests that the Council reform its decision-making process regarding military intervention. Replace the requirement for unanimity with a qualified majority. Establish a rapid response force drawn from member species. Create a framework that allows timely action against aggression." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices, some supportive, many opposed, all intensely engaged. The chairperson eventually restored order and addressed Blake once more. "Your proposals will be taken under advisement. Colonel, in the meantime, the Council formally requests that the Terran Federation share the military technologies employed against the Krath, particularly the gravitational manipulation devices." Blake's expression hardened. "That request is denied. The Terran Federation will not proliferate technologies with potential for mass destruction. We develop these capabilities for defensive purposes and will maintain strict control over their deployment." Before the chairperson could respond, the chamber doors opened to admit an unexpected delegation, Vani representatives led by Commander Lero, accompanied by several Krath officials including, remarkably, Supreme Commander Vash himself. Blake's eyebrows rose in surprise. The chairperson appeared equally taken aback but quickly recovered. "The Council recognizes the Vani and Krath delegations. This is an unexpected development." Commander Lero stepped forward, his slender frame dwarfed by the massive Krath beside him. "Honored Chairperson, members of the Council, we come before you with an unprecedented joint petition." Vash, his scaled features carefully composed to mask any emotion, spoke next. "The Krath Empire has entered into direct negotiations with the Vani system, facilitated by Terran diplomats. We have agreed to a permanent cessation of hostilities and the establishment of a demilitarized zone between our territories. This announcement sent shockwaves through the council chamber. Nothing in recent galactic history suggested the Krath would willingly negotiate with a species they had previously targeted for conquest. Learo continued. Moreover, the Krath Empire has agreed to withdraw from 3 systems recently brought under their control and to establish a framework for addressing territorial disputes through diplomatic rather than military means. The chairperson's iridescent skin pulsed with confused colors. This is, remarkable. What prompted such a dramatic shift in Krath policy? All eyes turned to Vash, who stood rigidly, clearly uncomfortable in his current role. The recent conflict with the Terran Federation has necessitated a reassessment of Krath military doctrine and expansionist policies. We have concluded that certain adjustments are prudent. The careful diplomatic language barely concealed the underlying reality. The Krath had been severely rattled by their defeat and were scrambling to adapt to a new galactic paradigm where their military supremacy could no longer be taken for granted. Blake watched this exchange with carefully concealed satisfaction. The Terran victory had accomplished more than just saving the Vani. It had forced the Krath to reconsider their entire approach to interstellar relations. Sometimes, a single decisive demonstration of force could prevent far more bloodshed in the long run. Learo turned to address Blake directly. Colonel, the people of Vani owe you and the Terran Federation a debt that can never be fully repaid. You sacrificed much to save a civilization that had no claim on your protection. We formally request closer diplomatic and cultural ties with humanity, that we might learn from your unique perspective. Blake nodded in acknowledgement. The Terran Federation welcomes such ties, Commander Learo. We have much to learn from each other. What followed was unprecedented in Council history. A 3-hour special session in which the traditional power dynamics of galactic politics were fundamentally rewritten. The Terran Federation, previously considered a minor player, was suddenly at the center of a new coalition of systems seeking mutual protection and cooperation. The Krath Empire, chastened by its defeat, found itself grudgingly participating in diplomatic initiatives it would have dismissed as weakness mere weeks earlier. As the session concluded and the various delegations prepared to depart, Vash approached Blake in a private moment away from the other representatives. Colonel, the Krath commander began, his voice pitched low. There is something I must know. During the battle, you disabled our ships rather than destroying them. Even when victory was assured, you offered our vessels assistance with evacuating wounded. Such tactics are incomprehensible to us. Blake studied the imposing Krath warrior thoughtfully before responding. Humanity's history is filled with war. Commander Vash, we've learned its costs better than most. When we fight to win. But we also understand that today's enemy might be tomorrow's ally, given the right circumstances. He gestured subtly toward the council chamber where new accords were being formalized. Case in point. Vash's yellow eyes narrowed slightly. Some among my kind view such restraint as weakness. And what do you think, Commander? Blake asked directly. A long moment of silence passed before Vash replied. I think that any species capable of defeating the Krath fleet while choosing not to annihilate it possesses a strength more profound than mere destructive capability. It is worthy of further study. Blake couldn't suppress a small smile. Perhaps that's a beginning. As Vash departed with the Krath delegation, Commander Zara approached Blake, having observed the exchange from a distance. Making friends with the enemy, sir? She asked with a raised eyebrow. Understanding the enemy, Blake corrected. The Krath respect strength above all else. Now that they've seen ours, they're reassessing their assumptions about humanity and our place in the galactic order. Zara nodded thoughtfully. The Galactic Council is doing the same. Your speech certainly stirred things up. That was the intention, Blake admitted. For too long, the Council has prioritized stability over justice, procedure over protection. Sometimes systems need a shock to evolve, and the Terran Federation has certainly delivered that shock. Zara observed. The question is what happens next. We've revealed some of our most advanced military capabilities, positioned ourselves as protectors of vulnerable civilizations, and directly challenged the authority of the established galactic order. That's a precarious position for a relatively new spacefaring species. Blake's expression grew serious. Precarious but necessary. Humanity evolved on a death world. Commander, we survived because we refused to accept limitations imposed by our environment or our enemies. That same determination will serve us well in navigating this new reality we've created. He gazed out at the stars visible through the council chamber's crystalline dome. The galaxy is changing. Zara. The rules that governed interstellar relations for centuries are being rewritten, and humanity will help write the new ones, not through conquest or domination, but through the same creativity, adaptability, and determination that allowed us to defeat the Krath against impossible odds. Zara followed his gaze to the stars. A tall order, sir. Indeed, Blake agreed. But if there's one thing humans excel at, it's overcoming impossible challenges. It's what Deathworlders do best. As they departed the council chamber to return to their ship, news of the Terran victory against the Krath continued to spread throughout the galaxy. On hundreds of worlds, beings looked to the stars with new awareness that somewhere out there, a species from a death world had demonstrated that even the most powerful empires could be defeated by those creative and determined enough to stand against them. For some, this realization brought fear. For others, hope. But for all, it heralded the dawn of a new era in galactic history, one in which humanity would play a far more significant role than anyone had anticipated. And in the vastness of space, on countless worlds where sentient beings gazed up at alien skies, a new phrase entered the lexicon of dozens of languages, a phrase that conveyed both warning and reassurance. Beware the Deathworlders, though for when they come, everything changes.